The Black Management Forum says it welcomes the appointment of a new broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Advisory Council. The 14-member council includes Black Business Council CEO Kganki Matabane and internal auditor Irene Dimakatso Morati. The BMF, one of the key voices in formulating, in fact, the BBBEE Act of 2003, says this council should be given more powers to hold those failing to implement what is expected accountable. The forum's president, Andile Nomlala, joins us this morning for more on the story. Andile, it's great to talk to you on such an important story. And I suppose the big question is, you know, the long absence of this council, this body, in monitoring the implementation of BEE policy. What has this meant over the past few years for that kind of implementation?
Thanks, Michelle, and good morning to your viewers. I think the first thing is that we welcome, as you say, and we are very pleased that there has been this finalization of the appointment. And I must state it out that BMF is particularly pleased because one of the two names that we've nominated actually got into the list. And that means that the Republic of South Africa's president takes BMF's recommendations very serious. And we have engaged with him, and we have engaged even through the BBC. And I think this is a culmination of all those engagements. And we do say that whenever necessary, we applaud the president when he does the right thing. And I know that, Michelle, to your question, is that there has been perceptions, whether correctly or not correct, that there has been not necessarily a good attention that is made or is given to empowerment in the country, particularly by the current sixth administration. But we believe that with the relentless pressure that will continue applying as the black business and BMF in particular, I think that we'll get to the right direction. And I know that there are many other priorities in the country, but transforming our economy and reducing inequality, I think there's nothing that supersedes that.
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, there's no overstating how important that kind of transformation is. But the obvious criticism, and you would have predicted this question this morning, Andile, is how are we going to ensure that the criticism of BEE policy doesn't continue with the appointment of this new council? By that I mean that BEE, or at least the perception that BEE only benefits a very few political elites and politically connected people, that doesn't continue.
No, look, I think over the years we've learned, and there's been various amendments that were made in the BEE Act itself. I don't think that there's any argument now that can say that there's still an isolated individuals that benefit. We have seen a number of BEE transactions that had ESOP structures, which means it benefits employees. We still want to see black industrialists being given an opportunity. I think the priority in this, the BEE Council should focus on, amongst other things, is that there's a need for an integration of the sectoral targets from both the workplace transformation and the supply chain transformation, which is the master plans that are presented and are given to the charters. If we're to integrate and measure, because there's been a surmountable amount of transformation that has taken place in the workplace, even though it's not as sufficient at the executive and senior management level. If we're to integrate those benefits and crystallize them with some of the companies that have done well in integrating and transforming their supply chain, we'll be able to measure. I think the BEE Council needs to look at that, and also the BEE Council must look at the powers that are given to the BEE Commission, the powers that would be more biting on those that are non-compliant to transformation, right, and powers that would be more biting to those that are not implementing transformation.
I mean, that will be the key, won't it? That the Council is able to implement policy strictly and hold those who do take advantage of the system for the benefit of only an elite few, to hold them accountable, and for sanctions to be put in place.
Look, Michelle, we have been arguing, and we are pleased that the President, in his last letter of Monday, has actually echoed the argument that BMF has been making. We believe that although it's necessary to have the structural reforms, that particularly in the transport sector and the network sectors that could integrate a number of people into our economy, but you can never, ever divorce the need for us to create economic growth outside of the participation of black people. I think we have made that hollow voice alone for some time, and I think the president has reached and realized his Damascus moment by arguing very strongly, both at the BBC Gala dinner and on his letter on Monday, that you can't separate transformation from growth, because other people have been, especially those that we know that don't want to see transformation, have been arguing quite hollowly to say that the economic growth is a priority that would achieve transformation. But we know that in the first 3 administrations we had a sterling economic growth, but that didn't integrate our economy. So now any developments that had to do with the infrastructure investments that the government must make, it must be deliberate and precise in including black people and in particular black business. And we see also, and I must state it, with the deals that are taking place with the likes of SAA, we are not happy about the involvement of white companies in those transactions. We can't, in this day and age, when we want to industrialize and create black business people at a bigger scale, not at SMME level, and we took the opportunities where we could say some of the power plants must be managed privately, and if they are managed privately, for instance at Eskom, it must be given to black business people so that we create a huge industrial sector of black entrepreneurs. But now, if you're going to give a strategic state-owned asset like SAA to white companies with a minimum black control, it's unacceptable to us. Those deals must be done at purely 100% black ownership if we want to create a transformative environment that would, for longer period of time, create economic growth and integrate in the majority. The 80% of our economy must be owned by black people, because we are 80% of the economy, not 51%, I mean, not 10%.
Yeah. You'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who would disagree with the kinds of numbers that you're giving us this morning, Andile. My question to you, though, is what needs to change with this new council? Because the other numbers that speak to the success or failure of the policy of BEE, if we look at the unemployment numbers, it's at an all-time high. We saw a marginal decrease this week, but still, unemployment is at an incredibly high level in the country. And who's the worst affected? Black South Africans, black women, and the youth. More than half of the country's young people today are sitting without a job. Surely that speaks to whether previous implementation of BEE has been successful. That's why my question to you was, what will be different this time around?
Can I shock you, Michelle? The compliance on government departments to the BEE Act, as things stands now, is at 10%. And the JSE listed companies compliance, whether, forget the ownership part, but on the other elements, is at 43%. Now, it tells you that if we have the state that doesn't take the very same act that they employ or they promulgate to our society through their legislative arm in parliament, they don't take it seriously and they don't implement it seriously, then the country would never progress. Now, all needs to happen is that we know that in the private sector, there has been a complete rejection of employment equity at the level of executive level. So any of these laws, if they are continuing to be a willing buyer, willing seller type implementation where certain companies implement these laws and there are no consequences or benefit, and certain companies don't implement and there are no consequences or benefit, then we might as well go home. The reality is that the BEE Council needs to be very fervent and very clear on how they want everybody to comply. And by the way, if people are not complying, there must be severe and punishable consequences of a criminal nature, if you ask me, because these companies do budget for the penalties that we apply. Everybody in South Africa must exist with an ecosystem that, and the mentality that transformation is sacrosanct. Transformation is everything that we need to advance our society, both on a socio-economic sentiments and on the economic sentiments that the South Africans are expecting.
Yeah. So serious penalties, as you say, as one method of ensuring compliance. But also, Andile, we can't be having these broad policies of how BEE needs to be implemented. We need timelines, don't we?
No, look, the sunset period would come only at a point where South Africa, as an ecosystem that we exist in, understands that transformation cannot be sacrificed. Between me and you, I've been asking myself, which type of laws 28 years later that we have been promulgating and regulatory framework that we have been promulgating that hasn't advanced us as black people as we expected. We had apartheid here, Michelle, and that apartheid was a brutal system that was very clear on the economic advancement of white Afrikaners in South Africa in particular. Now, at some point, and I've been arguing that as the leaders that are coming up and the leaders of our country at this stage, the issue of transformation is an inevitable cause to us, and we know that whoever is derailing it is just postponing the inevitable. At some point, we won't have the patience, and at some point, we won't have the latitude to give grace and overextend ourselves to people that don't want to transform. At some point, we will compel them, and if failure which, they would have to find another country to live in if they don't want to be part of the system that would integrate and have a society that is inclusive and is non-racial. So for us is that whoever is not applying and is not putting their correct minds into implementing transformation is definitely postponing the inevitable. The transformation and the black rise economically in our country cannot be postponed any longer.
Andile Nomlala, Black Management Forum President, let me thank you for your time this morning.